Sonic Prime Season 3 has officially ended. If you haven't heard the news, it looks like it's all but confirmed to be over. The only thing to figure out next is where it takes place in the timeline, and if you watch yesterday's video, there's a pretty good idea as to what that is, but fans are not happy about it. But regardless, since the show is over, there's not much left to talk about. It was a pleasure covering Sonic Prime for you guys, but in today's video, we will be ranking every single character in Sonic Prime. Since everyone's arc is complete and now we know that the show is over, we can now definitively rank everyone. So make sure to subscribe to the channel with all notifications. I'll give you a second. And drop a comment down below. Let me know if you disagree with anything that I said, but let's get into the Sonic Prime tier list ranking. So here it is. Here's the tier list with, I think, just about every single character in Sonic Prime. And first thing we have to do is talk about the main cast, because they're all seemingly here, even though they're barely in the show. As you guys know, if you watch every episode of Sonic Prime, the main cast is barely in the show, and I'm pretty sad about that. I was hoping for some big, giant epilogue, right? Like, I wanted to see, like, the whole show about Sonic Prime is about Sonic saving his friends, so it's like, we're hyping up the interaction that he's gonna have with his friends when he finally sees them, because that's what we're hyping up for the entire show. He sees them, they finish the fight scene, and then it just like pretty much ends. Like the pacing on that last scene was not that good. I wanted to see like what the friends' reaction was. I wanted, I thought the epilogue could have been better. So for that reason, without any hesitation, all the original characters, unfortunately, are going to go into the D tier for me for this show. Even Eggman. I love Eggman, but like, listen, we don't really get to see enough of them. Rouge, she had like a pretty good scene when she like breaks in. I could almost put her in C tier, but just to keep it consistent, every single character, Orbot, Cubot, Eggman, everyone, they have to go into the D tier, unfortunately, because they're barely in the show. I think I'm being fair and equal when it comes to that. Next up on the tier list, we have these two random characters right here. I guess we have one from New York City and one from the Pirate World, but they're literally just side characters. I'm also going to throw these guys into the D tier. I don't think any of them did anything significant. I think this pirate guy, he was like, yeah, he had a little role, but nah, I'm going to give him a D tier. Next up, we're going to move on to this C tier. And what do we got for the C tier? Well, we have the jungle characters. Now, the jungle characters to me are all kind of the same. In this sequence of Sonic Prime, you don't really see too much out of these guys. I mean, most of them, for the most part, are just like side filler characters. Like there's some of those characters in the Shadowverse. Not every single character is as important as someone like Dread, Rusty Rose, for example. But to me, out of all the Shatter Spaces, Boss Cage Maze was probably the like most forgettable out of all of them. And for that reason, I think we can safely put Big the Cat from Boss Cage Maze into the C tier. We can safely put the Knuckles into the C tier. And Mangy, my boy Mangy, listen, I like Mangy. I think he's funny. He probably gets a little bit of a redemption, especially at the end of season 3, but for the most part, Mangy's also just like a forgettable character who also doesn't talk. So unfortunately, Mangy also goes into the C tier as well. Now we're going to get into some other characters in the C tier, and you'll notice that not all the Boss Cage characters are in the C tier, but these three in particular really felt like they were all the same. They basically just blended in. Next up in the C tier, you have the little kid Eggman, the one that's like kind of a teenager that plays video games all the time. That one, he's just kind of like miserable all the time. Okay, his official name is actually Dr. Dote. So yeah, he basically doesn't do anything in the show. I feel like he adds nothing to the Chaos Council, which aren't that bad. A lot of people don't like the Chaos Council, and it probably would have been cooler to get a little bit more of an explanation for how they showed up, because there's 5 Chaos Council members. Like, how did all the Eggman Prime characters like end up in the same shatter space together, but all the other ones are separate? I would have liked to have had that explained too. I thought something like that would have got fleshed out in season 3, but no, it didn't. I'm gonna put Dr. Dote in the C tier. I really don't think he adds anything to the show. Out of all the Chaos Council members, he's definitely my least favorite. Next up, we got Babbles. We got the baby. I'm also, out of all the Chaos Council members, probably gonna put him into the C tier as well. I really don't think he really adds that much to the show either. I mean, he's definitely funny. He's like borderline B tier just because it's like, all right, it's funny. It's a baby Eggman. Like, this is absolutely hilarious. I'm not gonna lie. He was also like one of the first villains that Sonic goes against, but ultimately he doesn't talk in the show. He's kind of annoying and he doesn't really add much to the plot whatsoever. So I'm gonna keep him in the C tier. All right, next up on the tier list, I'm gonna put the Big the Cat from the Pirate World in the C tier as well. I can't really remember him being that significant to the plot or to the show. Once again, he feels like one of those characters that just don't really do much for the show, although he is kind of cool. Look at Froggy go, by the way. By the same token, I also put the Big the Cat from New York City into the C tier as well. It's weird because he actually is one of the first Shatter Space characters we run into, but he really doesn't add much to the show at all. I haven't watched the first 2 seasons in a while, but I just can't really remember this character having much significance, so he goes into the C tier. All right, next up, we're gonna get into some hot take territories. So we're gonna move on to the B tier. I'm gonna put the old Eggman as well as the hipster Eggman in the B tier. I thought the old man Eggman was just kind of funny, and him and the hipster Eggman both kind of team up, and they actually like give Sonic a challenge in No Place. Several times throughout the show, Dr. Deep definitely gives all the characters problems, and I like his little fighting suit. He was certainly a tough match for Sonic at several points in the show. I also think he's just kind of funny. The dynamic between him and the old Eggman is pretty funny because the older Eggman kind of represents like the older generation that hates people like Dr. Deep, who's more of like a Gen Z type person. So I like the contrast between them and the fact that they're actually like formidable foes. So I put them in the B tier, actually, surprisingly. And just like those Eggmans, I'm going to put Mr. Dr. Eggman also into the B tier. The Chaos Council were pretty interesting villains, especially in the beginning. They seem a lot more formidable than they actually are towards the end. I mean, if you watch season 3, you know the ending. They're not that crazy. He's a pretty solid antagonist. He's clearly the leader of the Chaos Council. And him and his crew basically built New York City. The only problem is we don't get a proper explanation why all 5 of them made it into one shadow space while the others didn't. But he's still a pretty formidable villain. He could probably go into the A tier. But after the huge buildup and they just get beat so easily at the end, it kind of makes him fall out of the A tier. I think I just drop all of them into the B tier. Because the Chaos Council really does at some point in the show feel like an unstoppable villain. But the way they go out is kind of sad. So I'm going to put them in the B tier. Next up, we have Rouge from Boss Cage Maze in the B tier. I think her name's Prim Rouge or something like that. Clearly, prior to Thorn Rose joining with them, she's actually like the leader of all the characters in the Boss Cage Maze. She's clearly a capable fighter. And due to her leadership role and the ability to make up with Thorn Rose as the leader of that faction, I'm going to go ahead and put her into the B tier. Although I've said before, the Boss Cage Maze characters are probably the most forgettable. Except for one, of course, and we'll get into that. So B tier it is. And also in the B tier, I'm going to put the Pirate Rouge as well. All the pirate characters are pretty good, although I will say for the most part, the Pirate Big was kind of like just there. But Pirate Rouge definitely can hold her own, and I thought she was really cool. I'm also going to go ahead and put Sails into the B tier too. The reason being was that scene at the end in season 3, Sails and Mangy. I mean, honestly, I put Mangy in the C tier, but Mangy low-key belongs in the B tier for that ending in season 3. But again, there's not really enough of them, and I feel like they're not as significant as the other Shadowverse characters, but I'm gonna go ahead and put them in the B tier. We're gonna also go ahead and throw Chaos Sonic into the B tier. This may be a controversial take. Chaos Sonic is an alternate version of Sonic, which surprisingly he acted like he's never seen one before, although a lot of people say this, but it's not like Sonic said he's never seen one before. He just acted a little surprised that came out of nowhere. He's powered by the Paradox Prism, and he's a lot stronger than Sonic, which is kind of annoying. And speaking of annoying, this guy is like really annoying. If you thought Prime Sonic was annoying, this guy is Prime Sonic on steroids in terms of being annoying. I gotta say, his design is pretty awesome. Like, it's nice to see a new take on like what a Metal Sonic should look like. But the problem is he gets defeated basically in one episode, and you never see this version of Chaos Sonic ever again. And he was very powerful. It took a lot to take this guy out. He would probably be higher if he was maybe a more significant threat overall to the plot. But the fact that he gets defeated in basically one episode means that I have to put him into the B tier. Although some people really do like him. He could be higher, but let's face it, he did not have enough screen time. All right, that brings us to the next set of characters. So we have Pirate Amy in the A tier and Thorn Rose in the A tier. And there's a big reason why I do this. Black Rose is part of the pirate crew, which definitely has like the most charm and character out of all the Shadow Space characters. But what I really like about Black Rose is her dynamic with the other characters. In Sonic Prime, all the Amy Roses basically become like best friends, sisters, or whatever. And I really did like that dynamic. Dread even ends up making her the captain at the end of Sonic Prime. So clearly she's like an important character. And clearly she can hold her own in battle, which she does. The coolest thing about Black Rose is that she was actually able to break through Rusty Rose. That is why I think she's a really cool character, and the sister dynamic between all 3 of the Shadow Space Amy's is extremely interesting to see, and the fact that she was the one person in the show able to convert Rusty Rose onto the good side makes her an A tier character. And also, I'm gonna go ahead and put Thorn Rose into the A tier because I really liked her arc in the Boss Cage Maze. She starts off as an enemy and she absolutely cooks Sonic, which of course Sonic is always getting cooked in this show for whatever reason. She also has the cool bird character, which is pretty interesting. But I think she's a very powerful enemy, and she has really good motivation for trying to protect the forest, which is very similar to the original Amy Rose. Like, Thorn Rose definitely represents a side of Amy that I can see, because I think the Shadow Space characters all are different versions of like different emotions and cycles that the characters go through. I see a lot of Thorn Rose in the actual Amy, so she's gonna go in the A tier. In the A tier, I'm also gonna throw Rebel Nux and Rebel Rouge, because I feel like these are 2 really good characters. These are 2 characters that were able to galvanize a resistance against against the Chaos Council, which basically took over New York City. Renegade Nux and Rebel Rouge, what they were able to do with galvanizing this resistance is super impressive. And I like their dynamic with Sonic because they look at him as a formidable threat, but they're also not scared to stand up to him. In this show, to me, they had a very comforting presence, and I love seeing them team up with Sonic. Also, Renegade Nux got the most clean jab in on Nine when everyone hated Nine. Like, yo, look at this shot right here. But also, Rebel Rouge is kind of like Knuckles' equivalent, so I kind of put both of them into the A tier. I'm just really impressed with how they were able to lead New York City and start this resistance. So they're kind of like a 1A and 1B kind of character. To me, they're like almost the same, but one. So it was really cool to see that. I put both of them in the A tier. All right, we got a couple characters left. Let's go ahead and put Shadow the Hedgehog into the S tier. Everyone knows that Shadow is just like one of the best characters in this show. This was the first time since Sonic 06 that Shadow was actually good. And when I say good, I mean just like written more accurately and faithful. Like newer versions of Shadow just don't do it for me. I don't know if it's the voice acting or the writing or maybe like a combination of both, but there's a reason why in the 2000s everyone loved Shadow the Hedgehog. He wasn't edgy for the sake of just like being edgy, which is sometimes the way he's written. He was a complex character with a lot of depth to him. Seeing this version of Shadow was just a breath of fresh air. Someone who actually cares about other people, willing to crack like somewhat of a joke and smile. Like in this show, we actually see Shadow smile, doing whatever it takes to protect the world. And not only that, we get moments in season 3 where Shadow's like, no, Sonic's not alone, he's with me, kind of thing. Like seeing the camaraderie between Sonic and Shadow, and again, seeing Shadow like have somewhat of a sense of humor was extremely refreshing to see. And he also like beats the hell out of Sonic a lot in this show. No surprise, I'm putting Shadow into the S tier. Another really good character that I like, and I'm gonna go ahead and put into the S tier, is Dread Knuckles. I feel like Dread Knuckles is one of those characters that's extremely memorable. Dread is a character that's driven by greed, and by the end of the show, he realized what truly matters, which is his friends and the people that he cares about. So seeing the redemption arc at the end of season 3 further solidified my opinion that I think he's an S tier character. I feel like all the characters that got their arcs resolved at the end of season 3 were definitely the best, which leads us into the next one, Rusty Rose. I think that she's an S tier character because she at one point was one of the most interesting and compelling characters of them all. Prior to Nine's arc or whatever, Rusty Rose probably had like one of the coolest arcs in the show. Despite the fact that she was created and manipulated by the Chaos Council to basically be a destructive robot, but through the power of seeing herself in different shatter spaces helped her realize that maybe she is human after all, and being able to release the Flicky that was inside of her, who she called her oppression, helped her truly realize that she can do this on her own, but it wouldn't be without the help of her 2 other Amy sisters. There's a lot that we could say about Rusty Rose, but she's a really good character. I'm sure a lot of you like her as well. Next up, my favorite character in the show, my #1 character, is definitely Ninetales. He is definitely by far the best character in Sonic Prime. Nine represents Tails basically if he never met Sonic. Like this is the embodiment of Tails without Sonic. He's alone and has no friends and was bullied when he was younger. So he ended up isolating himself in his workshop and creating extra Tails so he could defend himself against bullies and also help himself for being alone. However, when he meets Sonic, he truly learns what friendship is. Nine is basically like the emo version of Tails because he's just as intelligent and smart, but clearly he's had a rough upbringing and a tough time against the world. When he finally meets his only friend Sonic, who is someone who does genuinely care about him, but it turns out that like Sonic and Nine's friendship and goals are incompatible. If Nine chooses to help Sonic, Nine will never exist again, so you really can't blame him for trying to fight against Sonic. I mean, did Nine really do anything wrong? All he was doing was trying to protect himself and his own existence. I'm honestly really sad because if you look at the end of Sonic Prime when he gives Sonic a hug and realizes the error of his ways and ends up trying to fix everything, you can just tell the emotion. Like he's an emotionally damaged character, and all he wanted was someone to be his actual friend. You even see this in the scene where even after he leaves Sonic, he still leaves a hammock for him with 2 trees to remind him of Green Hill. He wants to create a perfect world for both of them. And it's sad because now he's gone. He doesn't exist anymore. He no longer exists. Like he's dead, bro. I'm sad. I'm depressed, man. I'm sad. I could go on forever about Nine, but he's the best character in the show by far. Best character development, best arc. It's really good that we got to see his redemption at the end. Just sad, man, thinking about him going. Last but not least, we have Sonic, the main character of the show. Where does he fit? Where does he belong? A lot of people hate Prime Sonic, and honestly, if I put him on a Sonic characterization tier list, I'd probably put him close towards the bottom. Sonic from Sonic Prime has a lot of good moments, and at the end of the day, I'm still biased. Like, I'm a Sonic fan. Sonic is my favorite character, and he's been that way for a while. I'm not going to put him in the S tier because he's annoying. He probably belongs somewhere in the C or B tier, if I'm being honest, but I'm going to go ahead and put him into the A tier. He's still the main character of the show. He still has his moments. He's not perfect, but the show doesn't work without him. As much as I know that there's better characters than him, and he probably belongs somewhere in the B and C tier, he's still the main character. He's the one that's got us talking, right? He's the star of the show, especially because of his significance for the show, but he does get beat up a lot. But also at the same time, I don't think I'm going to put any of these Shatter Space characters below over him, so I'm going to have to by default put him into the A tier, but at the very bottom of the A tier, all right? Because I can't seriously look at you guys and say I like any of these other Shatter Space characters, especially like these side characters more than the main character. A little bit controversial, maybe not deserved, but it is what it is.